Tonight on Ground Crew Command Radio, the big pivotal moment referred to as the US midterm elections ends in a 0-all draw. We've got some huge, desperately needed clarity after Cobra's post yesterday on what lies ahead of us and how we need to handle things moving forward. Critical stuff, folks. And we've got Justin Deschamps of Stillness in the Storm, who's going to be one of the speakers at the upcoming Disclosure Fest in Washington, D.C. this 11/11. And lots more, folks. Huge news today. And there's a lot to discuss. That's tonight on Ground Crew Command Radio. You're listening to The Unknown Light Warrior. This is Ground Crew Command Radio. You're listening to The Unknown Light Warrior. Yours in service, as always. So, like I said, folks, the US midterm elections, you know, I'm not a big fan of going or getting too 3D on you, but it was a crucial and pivotal moment or fork in the road on the way to the event. And I really want to make sure that we all have clarity on that much. And it's, you know, the cabal certainly wasn't happy with the result. And we can see that because the establishment media wasn't happy with the result. That's how you know the cabal was not happy with the result. The cabal and the establishment media are one and the same thing, basically. Be completely clear about that. If you're not, you better do your homework on Operation Mockingbird using an independent search engine in a big hurry so you know what's going on. I have to be blunt and honest about that. So, well, where do I begin? It's like I said on the promotional article, you know, there's still, with some exception to Cobra's post yesterday, and I'm certainly going to get into some details, in-depth analysis on that because this is crucial. Basically, Cobra's post sort of confirmed and cemented what I was already suspecting over the past few days and weeks, whereby if certain bottlenecks in terms of progress aren't, you know, unbottled or broken through with, there will result in an increase in intensities, far more than what we've been experiencing, by the way, in a closer to home kind of way. And it's made this 11/11 144K mass meditation even more crucial than what we all originally imagined. So quite a few light workers, understandably, are in a bit of concern and fear over what Cobra posted yesterday. And I'm going to provide, you know, and this is going to be from your higher self, by the way, the antidote, the antibiotic to that fear later on in the show. Because, again, if intense situations in and of themselves aren't really the issue. The issue is when you're not calm enough and still enough and your consciousness not high enough for that matter, or when one's consciousness is not high enough to know how to handle it. Okay. It's like that old Jim Rowan saying, don't wish your job was easier, wish that you were better. And I would always add, wish that you were closer to your true identity compared to where you're at the moment. So I'm going to get into that really big deal stuff. And of course, the other main topic and focus for today, unity in the community. God knows we need it this Sunday. And, we got Adrian VALLERA, Corey GOODE / Roger Richards Mass Meditation, which is a wonderful, delightful physical get-together at Washington, D.C. in front of the Lincoln Memorial. Go to Disclosure Fest. I believe it's disclosurefest.org. If you live in the area, you'll be crazy not to attend. It'll be a lot of fun. And you can attend, whether through the live stream at disclosurefest.org or whether being there physically. You can attend all that straight after our 144K, what I affectionately call the 144K Special Ops Mass Meditation. Will be before that. And we love massmeditation.org is doing their meditation as well. I salute all meditation groups. And speaking of salute, before I get into that, there has been some misunderstanding. Some people have misunderstood the full disclosure promoted by Corey and Adrian at Disclosure Fest. Okay, rest assured, it is not about partial disclosure. It is no way implying support. Okay, either implicitly or explicitly, they are not at all for partial disclosure. They are staunchly, just as much as we are, for full disclosure. And I know there's some debate as to how quickly all that should be released, whether it should be released over a 1 month period or a 6 month period. In one way, that aspect of it is going to make a huge difference to us light workers, because once all the topple bombs are removed and safe enough to physically reunite with our galactic family, as you can imagine, I'm sure we'll handle any 6 month process of rolling out full disclosure. And so I want to get that out of the way. Okay. Unity in the community is the name of the game, especially over the coming days. And I'm going to get into that with our special guest, Justin Deschamps. God, I love French names. Justin Deschamps of stillnessinthestorm.com, or is it .org? I beg your pardon, Justin. Yes, back to the saluting. Mr. Commander Man over here wants to salute everyone who participated or really wanted to and tried to participate in the 144K Halloween breakup party mass meditation last Wednesday night, 7 days ago. It was a success. We were there, retrieving the soul fragments of those highly unfortunate victims. And again, the dark ones in the physical realm were trying to pull in whatever darkness, non-physical darkness, they could through the vortexes that they open up through the invocations and the trauma of their victims. We shut it down, tracked back to the respective realms of the darkness they were invoking, and transmuted those layers of darkness and respective realms, and someone had to be there to do it. And to my awareness, we were the only ones there doing that. So a big, good old-fashioned, nostalgic military salute to all of you who did participate or wanted to and tried to participate, but we stopped somehow. It's understandable. Don't worry about it. It's okay. We move forward. We march forward. You know, winners never quit, as that old cheesy saying goes. And the new one that I just invented a few days ago, when the going gets tough, the tough sit down and transmute. So, okay. I hope some of you went over the 3 of those testimonials of 144K members who did participate in last week's Halloween breakup party mass meditation of the 144K. You know, I'm so touched. My heart is so touched whenever I get this sort of a feedback from people. I really, really appreciate it, folks. It means so much to me. And if you haven't read those 3 testimonials, we're around about halfway down the promotional article for this week's episode. Just go to, if you're a new listener and you just stumbled across a radio page without going past the promotional article on the blog, just go to returntoyourtruth.com/blog, and you'll see the 11/11 mass meditation title at the very top. Go check it out, folks, and subscribe at the bottom if you haven't already. Some of you may have noticed the overhauled 144K online reactivation campaign. The new link for the official, what I affectionately call 144K recruitment page, is www.144, the letter K, activated.org. Okay, that's 144, the numbers 144, K, activated.org. Go check that out. Tell me what you think. And that's a big deal in terms of things evolving over here at Ground Crew Command Headquarters. So let me just see here. Okay. I'm not seeing Justin online at the moment. So let's hopefully he'll be on soon. Anyway, so much to talk about, and I'm going to get into the first bullet point while we wait for Justin. And okay, let me just get into the current chaos. Okay, there's a few things. I don't know where to start from, really, what angle to start with, because, well, for one thing, the dust from the US midterm election still hasn't settled, okay? And yes, it is effectively a proxy war, a political proxy war between the white hats and the cabal, with what's going on with the 2 main parties. And I'm going to get into that critical detail further down. But first, there's a real possibility, okay, admittedly, I can only speculate at this point. We know from elections of single seats over the past 12 to 18 months, such as Roy Moore in Alabama and several others, where there was definite voter fraud that the cabal was carrying out. And the white hats were simply monitoring it and collecting evidence. Pardon me, some releasing going on here. Anyway, and I suppose you can bet your bottom dollar that the cabal was heavily committing voter fraud in yesterday's election, and including with the early votes as well. which almost certainly would have skewed the results in a negative direction. And there's quite a possibility that the white hats may pull out that particular card of exposing and pursuing, the necessary, legal prosecutions over voter fraud. And that's a real possibility. And it'll happen if it does happen, it'll happen in the coming days. It partly depends on whether the white hats can still carry out their planned operations and next steps and moves with the current result as it stands. Okay. If they can, if it doesn't affect their plans that they were planning on carrying out anyway, with the current results as it stands, then they may not play that card. Okay, they may not expose the voter fraud and begin prosecutions, even though in a technical legal sense they're supposed to. They may just use it as a threat against the cabal or cabal-controlled Congress people.
So obviously Justin's having a few wishes as well, which is good in one way. It's a surefire indicator that critical information is going to be revealed in this show. So, okay, let me see here. Bear with me, folks. All right, that's taken care of. It seems like I can be heard, and we can move forward. So, never easy doing this sort of stuff in the middle of effectively a battlefield, but we move forward.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You're coming through pretty well. How have you been? Since, actually, you were on the show, I don't know if you remember, you were on the show late last October. Do you recall that?
Yeah. It's. I don't remember specifically what we discussed, but I do remember the call, and I distinctly remember your voice. I have an uncanny memory for voices and faces, so.
Okay. Well, first of all, just quickly, what's been happening over at the Stillness in the Storm camp in recent weeks? Obviously, you've been busy, getting ready for the Disclosure Fest because you are one of the speakers there, correct?
I am. I'll be speaking on the main stage. I believe it's at 11 or potentially later. I'll actually try to find out so I can give accurate time here. But, yeah, there's been a lot happening behind the scenes. There's several projects I'm working on. I can't really talk much about it, but there's a massive, really exciting development happening with my Restore the Law group that we've been working on for several years now, and we're about to make some really big headway. So I'm really excited about that. Unfortunately, I can't really mention much about it, but in the weeks and months to come, there will sure be a whole lot that I will be discussing.
Can you give us? Can you give the listeners some clues? As safely as you can, just to give us the scoop.
Surely. Well, I started to work with various law groups back in as early as 2014. I came to a research point in my research, and I research quite a bit of different things because I'm looking for, the best information that I can use and the world can use to improve the planet in my personal life. And I discovered law, and I started working with this group back as early as 2016, peripherally, and then I got involved with them last year in October, actually. And the work that they're doing is some of the most prolific and monumental I've ever encountered. The person who organized this spent 30 years poring through legal documents, registers, rolls from ancient times. He read every sacred text in its original language. I mean, this person is just prolific, and they developed a completely coherent model of law that is so complete and precise that it actually has the ability to describe the universe better than the existing Roman system. Now, you may not think that that's all that important, but when it comes to law, when it comes to the basis of why one legal system is better than another, it's founded on what's called an ecclesiastical body of knowledge, and that ecclesiastical body of knowledge is usually relegated to priests and things like this. And what they were charged to do over the years was define what reality was and who human beings were in relation to reality, and particularly, the purpose of reality and what direction we should be heading towards. So in any event, I've been working with this group for directly for a year now, and we are making some really big headway as far as tools and that we're going to have available for the public to not only educate themselves on the law, but also to protect their rights and actually start to create real solutions to deal with the slavery problem we have on our planet. So I'm really excited about all that.
Okay, that's fantastic. Well, we're over here at Ground Crew Command, we're certainly all for any divinely aligned expression of law and anything else for that matter that's aligned with source. And it sounds like you're really onto that. And is there going to be practical tools on offer for people to be able to utilize this stuff?
Yes, certainly. One of the things we're developing is basically a system. So currently the way that your legal person is defined, all of your rights are actually secured in what's called an estate or legal person. And even though that term has kind of been used, or people normally think about legal person or estate as kind of these tools of the control system, everything you can basically look at within the legal system is itself just a tool that can be repurposed to do something good. So what we're going to be doing is offering a lot of tools to have people join their true status as beings of the Creator, all of their rights. So we've heard the idea that we have inalienable rights and those come from the Creator. Well, in order to really access that power, you have to occupy your office of man or woman. You have to actually occupy the divine office that was created for you by the Creator, specifically for your mission here on Earth. And most people don't do that. Most people don't take the time to understand that. So we'll be providing tools for them to understand what that is, and also create systems in the current Roman system to actually act as bridges. So it won't be that you're completely outside of the existing system. What you'll actually be doing is infusing or intervening on behalf of the Creator, in a sense, and with this better system, into the existing system of law and structure. So, yes, we'll have a whole bunch of tools, educational platforms, and the beauty of this is the more people that participate in this, the more strength and power it gets, and the more power it has to overturn and consume the existing system, and that's the whole point.
Fantastic. That's a great goal to have. That's really exciting stuff, Justin. And, okay, let's 11/11 is coming right up, and I admit I haven't had time to look up the astrological scientific fundamental aspect of that. And feel free to share what you know about as far as the astrological aspects of this big date is concerned. But it's a huge, huge date, which is why, I need to put most of the focus on that. What can you share with us regarding this particular 11/11 date of 2018? I mean, to begin with, it's pretty telling that an actual physical, sizable or larger physical get-together is actually occurring in the District of Columbia, of all places, and,
right.
Which is a part that needs to be, I suppose, subsumed into the constitutional republic and effectively liberated from the Crown District of London. So that's an interesting thing that must be getting influenced by the physical mass meditation get-together on that. I wonder if it really is the initial energetic reclaiming of the District of Columbia in order to set the wheels in motion for the constitutional republic to be rebirthed, I guess. And
right.
That's just one rabbit hole we can go down.
Sure.
Take it away.
Yeah,
What's your take on this?
Well, there's a bunch of things to consider, I would say. As far as the astrological significance, I don't actually know if there is any, just because the 11/11 day happens incrementally, and that incremental shift doesn't necessarily correspond with celestial alignments, to my knowledge. So I don't profess to be an expert in that regard. So there might be some astrological alignment. That being said, though, there is a numerological significance to 11/11, and this comes from the Hermetic and I believe it's the Kabbalistic concept of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. So if you take the Y8 and VH that you might have seen as the spelling of the name of God, Jehovah, what that corresponds to is this as above, so below fractal concept of the great order giving principle of the Creator infusing into the creation quote-unquote chaos or novelty, and then the sun orders, or the beings who have done that work to create order in the creation, then beget further order through using the principles of the Creator. And that's what that concept relates to as far as Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. Now, how does that relate to 11/11? Well, the word 11 is itself the masculine and feminine principle combined, and the Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is also a masculine and feminine principle. The Creator archetype is the masculine element that imparts the order, or the catalyst, the active principle. The creation receives that. That's the feminine principle. So within relation to 11/11, you have the same concept embedded right in the word 11. You have El, and then even, or Eve. So El, Eve, and then the N at the end relates to an and. So it's an iteration. It's like a fractal. It keeps going. And that's how the universe is created. It's these fractal structures. So I think it's significant that the community has chosen, I don't know if this came from some source or if this organically happened, but the 11/11 concept is extremely significant, obviously, for people synchronistically, but also when it comes to group activities, because when we as individuals come together, especially under a common purpose, and if we've really taken the time to establish common ground and unity, not just in purpose and values, but in ideas and beliefs, if we really work to do that, which isn't that easy necessarily, then we literally create a coherent energetic structure within our being. And then through the mind and heart interaction of our body, we radiate that coherent positive frequency out into the universe and into the world specifically, and that entrains onto various energy grids and systems. So to speak to where you were speaking to, which I thought was interesting, you brought this up, is that Washington, D.C. is the militaristic arm of the three city-state cabal, New World Order kind of faction, or I guess the new term is deep state. So if we look at the three major power structures, we have the ecclesiastical religious arm of the Vatican, then we have the financial and commercial aspect of London, and then we have the militaristic aspect of Washington, D.C. And these cities are linked up via the grid system or the ley line system. Now, London and Washington, D.C. are linked directly on the same line. And if memory serves, London is connected using a different line to the Vatican. So what I think is significant is a whole bunch of people, to my knowledge, I don't know if an event of this size and magnitude has ever taken place in Washington, D.C., but we are going to be doing this event in front of the Lincoln Memorial. Now, for those who don't know, Abraham Lincoln was basically the first dictator of the United States, despite his popular and his positive outlook in history with freeing the slaves. He was responsible for disbanding Congress. He was partially responsible for matter of fact, he did actually make the first executive order, General Order 100, which eventually became the Lieber Code. And he was also responsible for laying the groundwork for the federalization of the constitutional republic. So you could say that the constitutional republic, whatever form it was in at that time, dissolved and was replaced by a federalized corporate structure that we have today. So it's very interesting that this figure in history, which, by the way, at this monument, he's holding two fasces, which represent total domination and authoritarian power and control. That's what those symbols actually represent. He's holding these two things sitting in a throne. So we're going to be doing this event right there to transmute that energy, to bring in this energy of sovereignty, of taking responsibility, of love, compassion, truth-seeking, humility, working together, creating social harmony, creating unity to work together to solve our problems. We're bringing all of that energy into this very dense, negative location, you might say, and then we're going to be pushing that outwardly. And I think it'll have some amazingly positive effects.
Yeah, I mean, quite a few grid workers, have done a fair bit of work in the DC area over the past few years, and this may well be, but there's never been this amount of physical vessels doing a mass meditation on the District of Columbia piece of real estate. And I think it's the crowning sort of final sort of, what's the word, choose your metaphor here, the icing on the cake for all, everything that's been done in the past by other grid workers, both by being present there themselves or remotely. And it will really complement all past grid work in the DC area, which is a huge, huge big deal. And once again, another big salute to ADRIAN and VALLERA for making that happen, okay? Having the promotional power to pull in that many people and physically be on that location, which is crucial. It'll really finish things off really nicely and do so much, to move forward with the planetary liberation process because, things are still pretty precarious and are only getting more intense. But I digress. Was there anything else you wanted to add or mention? So for those of you who don't know, folks, the DC Corporation Act was enacted and passed in 1871. That's when America became a corporation, not a constitutional republic. Although that wasn't particularly Lincoln's fault, it is true that Lincoln was basically a fascist. He even shut down over 200 newspapers and didn't resolve the true cause of the Civil War, which was lifting those heavy taxes on southern states. And that's all it was. So was there anything else you wanted to add before moving on?
I think the fact that we're all gathering together physically in one location is really powerful. Not to say that people who can't be there physically won't be able to contribute. I think it's very similar to like almost like a satellite dish situation. If you imagine the center of the satellite dish, that's where all the people are gathered, and then the outer edge, that's where the people around the world are. We all act like this net out there. So what I think is really significant about this event is that we're using this collective meditation, which there has been for many years, people doing this. The Maharishi effect demonstrates that people setting an intention for peace positively affects the reduction of crime and various other aspects on the planet. But in this instance, we're focalizing it in a very interesting way. Instead of it just being nebulous insofar as what is the focus, we actually have a physical location. And when we have a physical location, it adds what you might call a magical quality to it. And when I say magical, I mean incorporating a ritualized space, a circumscribed space where an intention can be carried out, where we acknowledge our physical location on the planet. And that's, from a kind of science of consciousness perspective, that's really important because what it does is it orients us properly. So we have these north, south, east, west directions, and that electromagnetically and energetically relates to our own physical bodies. So when we enter that space, we go to this physical place to actually do this work. We'll be creating a physical nexus, a circumscribed space, a sacred space for this intentional energy to radiate out, which I think will be more powerful insofar as its ability to affect the planet and consciousness.
No, that's exactly right. It does, having this amount of people in that particular location, plus everyone else across the globe that can't make it to that physical location but will be participating either through the live stream or through their own work. Yes, it does add a whole other dynamic, quantum mechanical dynamic to it. And again, District of Columbia on a ley line, it's the seat of power, basically, of the United States of America entity. And, it's almost like, kind of like the equivalent of lighting up the pineal gland, as far as I'm concerned, of the United States entity. And that's an interesting thing to realise, because obviously that's something that darkness isn't going to want at all. But it is important to keep in mind that there are going to be other meditation groups doing meditations prior to the Disclosure Fest meditation. And I suspect, from a strategic point of view, that they're going to do a lot of the clearing of the way for the piece de resistance of the Disclosure Fest manifestation. Because, for anyone who's done grid work, or several of them in different locations, that it's all sequencing. X can't happen until Y is cleared and activated, and it keeps on going that way. And grid workers are quite familiar with that aspect of, grid work up in the planet end. What would do you have any extra take on that before we move on?
Well, the grid work is an interesting phenomenon. I can bring in my scientific perspectives to it. What I would say is that there are grids. So when we talk about grids, what do we mean necessarily? Well, I would say my definition of a grid, and this is just based purely on me looking into this subject and trying to glean what people mean by grid. What I think people mean by grid is that because of the rock that we have on the planet, the flowing of various energy systems, anytime you have things in motion, particularly electric bodies in motion, you're going to have magnetic fields created. And these magnetic fields tend to clump or bubble up together. So it's very similar to like if you were pouring a glass of milk or you were frothing foam for a latte or something like that. These magnetic fields are going to create little bubble networks. And those bubble networks, in a sense, you could call it like grid lines. So these grid lines are energetic places where different fields are interacting and creating these boundary zones, these interaction zones. And it's those interaction zones either where a ley line forms or some kind of a node forms. So what I think is interesting related to grid work and energy work is that people are actually going out there with an intention, and then they're doing something, an action, to actually ground that intention into the physical. And from a altering reality perspective, whether we're talking about, magic and energy work and, fairly quote-unquote woo-woo concepts like that, or we're talking about very specific, rigid, practical things, the way manifestation works is an idea is generated in the mind, and then it becomes reality through our action and behavior. So I think for the folks out there that are maybe taking a more passive role with this work, what I would call the great work of making the world a better place, everybody has their part to play, and I'm not trying to say that anybody's path is better than anybody else's, but there's some paths that are more impactful than others. And there's this idea of competence, of skill, is that obviously there's some people who have learned how to do the great work better than other people. Not to say that they're better. So my point I'm getting at is that there's this kind of idea out there in the community that all we really need to do is meditate and withdraw our energy from the bad systems, and all of the goodness will just magically wash over the planet. And in some respects, that can be true. Withdrawing your energy out of something does usually liberate space and energy for something else to come in and replace it. But often something positive has to be created through physical work, through doing something. So the grid work is a variant of this type of energy work within the awakening community that I think is really exemplary of the right way of doing things, if I can say it that way, which is that we have to take our good intentions and we have to go out into the world and actually live these intentions out in the world, boots on the ground. And when we do that, we can actually make some really great progress, in my opinion.
No doubt. And one important thing I forgot to mention is, with the physical gathering on the District of Columbia, the one layer of the energetic dynamic, the satellite analogy that you used before, it was basically the same thing of what we did on the in the Kefren, or the Middle Pyramid in Egypt, on the 21st of December 2012. And there was about 25, actually more like 35, because there were a lot of local Egyptian light workers that turned up as well. We gathered there, and that was a bit of a cloak and dagger operation, which I won't go into details about because they had banned meditations. Pretty hairy moment, but anyway, we managed to pull it off just in time. But anyway, the point is, it was us there in that physical key location on the grids in that Kefren pyramid, and everyone else, in other words, the vast majority of meditators, were all around the globe and focusing the energies into us, where we were, within the pyramid. And it looks like and that was pretty interesting, okay? And it looks like we've got the same dynamic at play here. And I'm not ruling out the possibility, if I can manage it technically, to encourage people to focus, to join the live stream and just pour white light, through the physical vessels of everyone that's actually going to be there and into the grid and really light up that place. What do you think of that?
I think that's great. Yeah, having a really clear intention like that sounds like it'll have a very beneficial effect, especially if it's something that crosses over to multiple people. So that's why guided meditations, where somebody's actually saying words that evince certain images in people's minds, is really powerful, because the stuff in your mind, what your mind actually uses to create images, has substance to it, and that substance can create a correspondence or a resonance between people that kind of creates like a people grid, an array of coherent individuals that are all feeding into the same type of frequency that's enhanced its power.
Yeah. And, I want to remind everybody that on top of all of that, and I've always advocated, when one, being incarnated, and onto the physical plane on this planet, and therefore being calibrated in certain sacred ways with all the energy systems, it gives us certain powers, certain voting rights, certain abilities when we project our consciousness from the physical plane, within our physical bodies, to the non-physical planes. You basically have the Superman effect, where, Superman, he leaves this planet. If everyone saw that movie back in 2013, they left their planet Krypton, they come to Earth, and gradually they start getting all these abilities starting to get activated, because they're not in their native realm. They're in a different realm where things act differently. And that's the sort of loose analogy that I use when one projects their consciousness from the physical to the non-physical. It gives us abilities that, our galactic family don't actually have if they were to, go with their ships onto one of the non-physical planes. And that's a bit of a difficult one to grasp for the heavily programmed and conditioned rational mind, but it's important to keep that in mind, folks. And obviously, we won't get into the sciences about that because I don't ever know it. I'm just talking about my own experiences and the shifts and fairly blatant physical indicators that occur after doing work, energy sessions, whether it's grid work or remote work. So I'm just talking out of experience. I don't have the scientific quantum mechanical nuts and bolts of how and why that works the way you do, Justin. But I want to remind everyone about that, because it rekindles that deep dormant memory of our true power to therefore more fully utilize it, okay, to really run with it, and for the mind to believe it. Otherwise, it shuts it down. Big deal stuff. So, sorry I went off on a bit of a rant there, Justin, but it was important to, throw that one in. Really critical stuff.
Always love hearing a good rant.
Sorry?
I said I always love hearing a good rant.
Well, thank you. Yes, if it's a good rant, it is. It is a big deal if it's a good one. We don't always get it like that, So ultimately, and that's a fundamental aspect of gaining self-mastery, which is the next thing on my notes here. Gaining that self-mastery, to help create the reality we desire, and that's what it's all about. Us, we the people, taking control, calling the shots. This 11/11, only a few days away now. Altogether, it has to be a day of unity, and it's going to be a bit of a long day as far as meditations are concerned. There's at least 3 meditations going on, and a lot of the same members are going to be participating in the other meditations. And so for all the best of reasons, it's going to be a bit of a long day, and every meditation is really going to help, Now, just quickly, who's actually going to be guiding the one at Disclosure Fest in DC?
That is a good question. I believe it will be Adrian, although I'm not quite sure. And while we're on the subject, I just want to mention to people that I will be speaking at 11:05 on the main stage, and that I also have a workshop that I'll be conducting about the technique for realizing your higher self in the flesh here. I'm looking for the workshop time. I can't find it. But in any case, I believe it will be Adrian who's conducting the meditation, although I'm not quite sure.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so you're going to be on stage at 11:05 a.m. And is that the actual workshop, or is the workshop separate from that?
The workshop is separate. I don't have in front of me, unfortunately, when that is or where it is, but I am doing a workshop as well that sometime this weekend. I don't know if it's on the 11/11 day.
Okay, well, folks, if you're in the area and you're planning on going, just reach out to Justin at Stillness in the Storm. Is it .com or .org? It escapes me right now.
.com, stillnessinthestorm.com.
Yeah, get in touch with him through there if you're planning on going, and check out his workshop. And to clarify, it's about bringing in more of your higher self into the physical vessel. Is that what you said?
Precisely, yeah. So I've basically been part of the research project and work I've been doing over the past, I'd say 2.5 years or so, is taking my personal process for healing trauma and developing my character and self-analysis and shadow work and realizing my spiritual potential. Something I organically knew how to do for most of my life. I've overcome a lot of hardship in my life, and that's what I would call true divine providence. It was an opportunity from the universe given to me, and I decided to take it and run with it. And as a result, I learned how to do these things. Part of this process that I'm discussing here is how you can use affirmations and ritual or specifically consciously created behaviors to actually reprogram your subconscious, dig deep into the nature of your being, which was largely programmed between the ages of 0 to 6. So most of your subconscious programming was embedded at that time. So I'm giving tools for people to actually start to go into that programming, develop sensitivity for their own consciousness, so they actually become more sensitive to what's happening inside of them, And as a result of having that greater awareness inside of them, they'll be able to consciously direct their life properly. And I describe a whole system for how to do that based on values and ideals and visualization. So, and this draws from psychological research too. So it's not just an anecdotal process. I've spent the past 2 years basically confirming what I was doing intuitively myself using psychological research and various forms of philosophy to actually nest in this platform. So I call it the ideal self method. I'll be giving an hour or potentially as little as 45-minute talk about that, and that's also what my book will be about, which I'm currently working on as well.
Yeah, that's really great. That's a great way to serve people. And, folks, go check it out. And, we've all done a lot of different healing methodologies and practices. Some work, some work so-so, some work great, some work not at all. But every time you look into something, whether it works or whether it doesn't work, they all work to one degree or another. Let's face it, they all shift you that one significant step forward, or should I say back to your true identity and its immense power. And, it's critical to continue the journey of continuing to learn and grow. And, what Justin offers is really critical. And it's always nice to have, I suppose, some sort of 3D or physical confirmation on things that the rational mind always appreciates, which you seem to be providing. And, okay, a big deal that's going on in our, I don't like to use the word community really, but the awake and aware portion of the surface population is unity, okay? We'll call it unity in the community. From your perspective and experience for that matter, what do you think about what it's going to take to make this finally happen?
It's going to take willingness. People actually have to want to have the unity. And I would say right now we're in a place where people are fairly shielded or protected from the cost of not having unity. So it's very similar to a situation like an addict. If you've been addicted to a substance your entire life, literally, like let's say you were unfortunate to be born addicted to heroin or cocaine, and the doctors, instead of detoxing from you, they just kept feeding you these drugs your whole life. Well, what would happen? You wouldn't necessarily be able to recognize how these substances aren't being positive influence in your life because you have no point of reference. And I'd say that the awakening community, if we want to use that term, and I'll preface that, and I actually agree with your sentiment in this regard. I use the term community loosely. What I'm more so saying is there's an aggregation of people that are similarly aligned in the sense that they have interest in some things, but they're not aligned in the sense that they sit down and talk to each other, or they discuss what their mutual truths and values are, or what their initiatives are and how they're going to try to realize their values. That doesn't happen in our quote unquote community. And like I was just saying a moment ago, I think part of the reason why is we've been shielded from the cost of doing so. We don't really recognize what's actually happening as a result of not being unified. But we can see the effects because, and this is one of the reasons I encourage people to study law and philosophy. Philosophy is, you might say that law are the rules that govern reality. Psychology are the mechanics that govern your being. And philosophy is the actual use and application of your beingness itself. So it's like the technique for how to use yourself, how to use your mind, your consciousness. And you really need philosophy because you need to be able to interpret reality. How do you know if your interpretation of an event or an insight or a piece of information is actually correct? Well, the way to answer that is in the philosophical realm. You have to contend with it in the realm of mind. So what I'm getting at here is that we, in the awakening community, in the truther community, This will be a rather, intense appraisal, but I feel like it needs to be said.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah. We're more interested in holding flags of belief and waving them in front of each other's faces than we are about sitting down together and trying to solve our collective problems. So we all are suffering under the same oppressive system. We're all enslaved by our own participation. We're all enslaved by our own ignorance. We all have poor quality food that makes us sick. I could list things till the end of time, and we're dependent on energy systems that pollute the environment. Various things. We're being bombarded by social engineering and mind manipulation that causes massive divide and conquer, division of the human family, causes relationship issues. I mean, the list of problems goes on and on and on and on. And yet, even though we're all affected by these things, we're squabbling about whether or not your version of the truth related to extraterrestrials or 9/11 or vaccines or chemtrails is the more correct one. So I think, I think what may help in this is a moment of collective, what you might call hand burning. So how do you know that something's wrong? It's because you feel a little pain. You feel something isn't right, and then your consciousness is drawn to that place as a focus, and then you use your faculties to absorb information about what's happening and assess it and diagnose it, and then you try to come up with a solution. So it's hands on a hot stove, what are you going to do? You're going to notice that your hand's burning, and you're going to pull it away because you feel pain. Like I mentioned, we've become so complacent and content. It's one of the prices of contentment, is you can become content in an unproductive, unbeneficial situation. We've become so content with the status of where we're at, but the energy of dissatisfaction, which we all feel because we all want to have a better world, we're not using that constructively. And I know that's a kind of a harsh appraisal of the situation, but I think it's something that needs to be said. And I
no, you're right.
Go ahead. Yeah.
No, you're right. And the audience here, well, except for new listeners, perhaps, know exactly what you're talking about. But exactly what you're talking about, because I quite often the words that I use for it is being comfortable with your discomfort, and over time, over a lifetime, you've lost your point of reference about how things are supposed to be as far as divine alignment is concerned, and we've become not just numb to the pain and conditioned to sort of live with and tolerate it, but for the false incarnational persona and identity, it's become the known, the familiar, that which you're familiar with, and anything that you're unfamiliar with is well, again, to the incarnational false personality, it's scary or negative or dangerous, only because it doesn't know it, not whether it's good or bad, and you can't see that distinction of good or bad. You can't sort of reach out through that, the old boundary of the known. And it sounds crazy to people, how a person can get quite comfortable with their discomfort, but it's true. You see it all the time, obviously.
Most certainly.
That's
the real price. Go ahead, you finish.
Yeah. I think we sort of nailed it in terms of what can be done to bring more unity to the community, and people just have to be, I suppose, at a whole other level, have to say, okay, no more discomfort, and being willing to venture into unknown territory as far as point of reference is concerned. And
precisely,
foremost, it's a scary thing to do. It takes courage, but we need to do that. And that'll go a long way in helping put unity at the top of our priority list and act on it. to that effect. Any last words, Justin?
I did a presentation at Contact in the Desert this year entitled Blueprint for a Better World Through Understanding ET Contact and Culture. And I would say that if you're interested in trying to understand why the situation is the way it is and what the kind of spiritual framework or backdrop for this process and trying to create unity, that is a really good presentation. And one of the things I discuss in it is that the reason we have so much hardship and disharmony and slavery on the planet is because we don't sit down and talk to each other about the things that matter. We don't sit down and talk to each other about what we agree is real, which is really important. So we have to develop in law what's called mutual subject matter jurisdiction. So we have these ideas, and we should really sit down and define what these ideas are so we're all on the same page together. And once we do that, once we agree that something exists and we trust that it exists, then we can orient ourselves in a direction with respect to that. So if we can sit down and agree that things exist like the problems I just listed earlier, but not just
on what we can agree on.
Right. Exactly. So it's what we can agree on. What we're doing in that instance is we're creating a space to talk about things, which is really important. So if we can do that, then we can create a culture and a community of discussion and of communication. And just like the cells of our human beings are designed to be social creatures. We're designed to share ideas with each other. And when we do that effectively, when we do it completely, greater harmony just naturally manifests. So I think it's really important, if you really want to get behind unity and you really want to solve these problems, you have to develop the capacity to have what I call multidimensional thinking. And what multidimensional thinking requires is you being able to see things not in black and whites. So in order to do that, you have to really dig into something and look at what's going on, get a first-hand account of it, and be able to see different perspectives, especially when you're considering talking to other people, because a lot of times we really agree on almost everything. There's only a little places we disagree, but it's often those little disagreements that get blown up into massive walls and barriers between people, when in reality we have way more in common. So I would strongly suggest people who want to know more about that, they can look into that presentation. Yeah.
Well, we all know, I mean, sometimes it can be as little as a mindset shift, where you approach things with people with okay, what can you do for them, rather than how can you achieve your own goals, regardless of how noble and mighty that goal might be. And of course, one thing that really unifies and has really unified people in the past is an idea. The right idea, the right message can often be powerful enough that can help people transcend their own personal beliefs and differences and what have you. And I do believe that idea is very near. It might even be right here with us right now. And on that note, Justin, it's been a great conversation. I really want to thank you for setting aside the time. And, I guess this is the last Ground Crew Command episode in a series of episodes that's all about the 1111 mass meditation. It's going to be a long, adventurous, energetic day for many of us, because many of us will be participating in 2 or even all 3 mass meditations. And that's something that I encourage, even though, it takes a bit of energy. But we've got all Saturday to rest and prepare our energies for that. And that's a little hint for everyone here. So, Justin, thank you so much for your time. It's been fun once again. And I too also can't remember what we spoke about last October. I was in Hawaii at the time doing grid work. And that's where I held the interview with you at the time. Thanks to a sponsor. And but intuitively, I do get the feeling that was a really good show as well, that people walked away with enormous value from. And so thanks again. And, that it's been fun again.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure. You can find my work at stillnessinthestorm.com, and I wish everybody a wonderful 11/11. Take care.
Yep, and we will all connect with you energetically, Justin, on the 11/11. It is the energetic D-Day. Make no mistake about that, folks. We have to fulfill our sole purpose, whether the current incarnational ego likes it or not. Let's make it happen. So thank you so much, Justin. It's been great. And that's Justin, everybody, from stillnessinthestorm.com. And I'm sure there's quite a few really cool things you can learn from him to move you several steps closer back to your true identity, who and what you really are, where your power, freedom, and abundance lies. That really sacred tagline, and return to your truth. And that sponsors Ground Crew Command Radio. So, folks, there's huge things going on that need to be discussed. I promised I'm going to give a full analysis of Cobra's post and the other things that's been released. And I've really made an absolute meal out of it for all the right reasons, in all the right ways, in all the rightly divinely aligned ways. And you'll know what I mean when we come back to the news portion of Ground Crew Command episode for this week. So stay tuned, folks. It's critical that you check out what's coming up in the news portion right after this very short musical break. Like I said at the beginning of the show, don't be fooled by the 3D-ness of the midterm elections in the US. It was a critical fork in the road as far as the, progress on the physical plane is concerned. And I can say now that I was putting some energy into it in my morning clearings yesterday morning. So let me start from the top here. Okay, it'll be I'm going to explain certain things that we all need to be fully on the same page about in the following order. Okay. So, as we know, many of you have understandably had or have ended up with a rather sort of ominous, vision ahead with regards to Cobra's post, and with things going so-so yesterday with the midterm elections, it was a nil draw, but particularly moving forward and looking ahead of us after the 11/11 date. Things have still, although there's still an intel blackout, mostly, for the most part, despite the occasional release here and there. Cobra's given us the crux of the message. It's hard to verbalise this. The crux of Cobra's message is twofold. One is it could be a threat to the cabal, with certain things that he wrote in there, particularly the swelling of the ranks and numbers of the resistance movement, and probably other off-world groups or underground groups like the Agarthans that are threatening to come to the surface. It could be just a threat, although on this occasion I think it's a threat they're seriously planning on carrying out if the cabal don't start doing the right thing. Second fold is, at the end, it tells us that, hey guys, this is what we're looking at. Okay, this comparatively more bleak picture moving ahead of us after the 11/11, if enough of us don't muster up and participate in the 11/11 mass meditation. I wasn't kidding about the title for this week's episode. But other than that, the intel is still fairly black. Okay, we don't know much else. So does this mean that the life forces want us to concentrate on the plasma top-up bombs this 11/11? And Cobra has yet again confirmed that the highest levels of the cabal won't and can't be removed until the plasma top-up bombs are. He basically explains that if the situation in the US doesn't go in a more positive direction, the more likely it is that the gloves will come off and positive military on the surface, as well as positive off-world groups, will start taking more direct action. Now, that sounds good, but careful, don't kid yourself. It also means for a rocky road ahead, because this will push the financial system to its limits if we're going to be getting explosions going off here and there and firefights. Okay? It means that the financial system will be pushed to its limits in terms of it not collapsing, I guess. Partly because if Operation Mockingbird, for example, is actually shut down finally, and the cabal media starts telling the truth, rest assured, the Rothschild and Black Nobility factions will pull the plug on the US dollar, which might have a cascade effect on all the other Western currencies and the global economy. And you can expect your next loaf of bread to cost up to $10,000. Which brings me to the reminder to make sure you're stocked up on food as much as you can afford to, for a minimum 2 weeks at this point. At first, up until early last week, I was thinking 7 days is probably be enough, 14 days for sure. But unless things shift to a positive, higher timeline after 11/11, you're looking at a good 6 weeks worth of food and water that you're probably going to need. So that's what I mean. Let that sink in, and that's what I mean when I say it all sounds exciting and dandy with more direct physical action by our off-world brethren and white hats on the surface. But rest assured, there's the other side of the coin to that. Now, I would think that the white hats have treasury or cryptocurrencies ready to go if that happens. Okay, if the loaf of bread costs $10,000 and up, just like in the Weimar Republic in Germany during the Great Depression, where the wheelbarrows that they were literally using to carry all the Deutschmarks in to go buy a loaf of bread had more value than the Deutschmarks that were in the wheelbarrows. That's what we're looking at. So, I digress. You would think, well, we can't count and bet on the white hats having treasury or cryptocurrencies either ready to go or literally able to release it soon enough if all this happens. But, don't they need congressional approval for that? Because according to the Constitution, only Congress has the power to mint coin as the Constitution goes. And the white hats, basically the positive military, are doing their best to stick to that, to stick to the Constitution. So let's that's what they're wrestling with. And this is the kind of gamesmanship being played that we need to be aware of to understand the gravity of the situation. Because from my perspective, or at least in terms of ramifications, there's very little that's glamorous about off-world groups starting to intervene directly on the physical plane. Because there will be a response, okay? More than just the plasma topper bombs. So that's things to be aware of, okay, and have perspective of. Now, will we reach critical mass on 11/11? As of now, thanks to the fact that there's several meditation groups participating on 11/11, that's possible. It's a bit of a tightly held secret by the non-physical light realms at the moment. But if we don't, there is a way to have the same effect as the critical mass number, and that is by doing more advanced meditations and channeling more light through your personal grids or consciousness for that matter during the mass meditation. It is possible. The 144K is about stretching our abilities, doing new things. That's a divinely ordained thing as well. And this is part of the reason why the 144K mass meditations take from between 1 to 2 hours. Okay? And although all other meditation groups do critical work, which I love them for and salute them for, the 144K really doesn't kid around. We don't, again, I'm not implying any judgment here, just to clarify, but we speaking for ourselves, only speaking for the 144K, we don't treat this like a fun hobby, okay? We treat this like a professional military operation because that's what it really is in the non-physical sense, of course. We need to treat it with the same level of seriousness and professionalism. And that's very high levels of light and high dimensional beings speaking there, including my higher self and your higher self. Okay, this isn't just physical incarnational Jim Torsakis tooting his own horn. I would not waste your time like that. You know me by now, unless you're a new listener. So think in those terms, think in that direction. Okay, stretch your mind in that area that's really sort of ventured into. That's why I'm mentioning this stuff, because I'm also here just to provide the triggers. Okay? We need to get together in a big, professional, smart way. Do things in a new way that darkness isn't familiar with. You know the old saying by Einstein, you've heard it 1,000 times. The definition, again, I'm not implying anything negative here, but it does need to be said. the definition of insanity is by doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. I suppose it's applying that principle as well. 144K is about breaking new ground because we're on the ground here. The upper realms, the physicals and non-physicals way outside the veil and in the high dimensions, they need our ideas. And let me put it to you another way. We've all been conditioned with the basic general perception and concept and mean that our galactic brethren, high dimensional beings, basically anything outside the veil and this matrix and this level of density is something better than us, I guess, knows more than us, and more psychic and more powerful. Well, let me tell you this one fundamental fact. We're nothing beneath them and they're nothing above us in a basic general sense of the word. We're the ones, and I'm going to be really blunt here, we're the ones that have been through the shit over the past 26,000 years, not them, even though they have their fair share of rough experiences in the 4D, believe me, but it's not the same as this endless garbage being dragged through the mud by darkness over the past 20 to 30,000 years, stuck on the one planet. And because of that, believe it or not, when those experiences are mixed in with your light, your true light, you get this creation of new perspectives and ideas and desires and intents. Like, let me put it to you another way. Two of the things that ETs, that are so beautiful, aligned, beaming with so much light, and you just feel awesome just being in their presence and all that kind of stuff, right? Two of the things that they're absolutely fascinated with and love is the music created on the physical, low densities, on the physical plane of this planet over the past, especially the past few decades, let alone the past few thousands of years. Absolutely fascinated because it's unique to this universe, and if not the multiverse. I went out and saw Bohemian Rhapsody last Sunday night, which I'd strongly recommend you go see. It's a real back to basics, politically correctness-free movie, finally. If you haven't heard of it, if you haven't heard about it, it's about the story about Queen, the rock band Queen and Freddie Mercury. Awesome movie. You'll love it. Go watch it. They're fascinated by that kind of creation. They're fascinated by taking dense, primitive, boxy things like cars, right? Prehistoric technology compared to what they got, and adding that feminine, graceful touch to it through these beautiful designs like Porsches and Lamborghinis. Don't think ETs aren't fascinated by how we've taken dense, ugly, boxy, rigid things and turned them into works of art or artistic streaks to them. They're fascinated by stuff like that. They want our ideas. They need our input. Because we add a piece to the puzzle, to the puzzle, as far as planetary liberation is concerned, that they don't. Because primarily because they haven't been through what we've been through, especially if you're an old soul. We're on the ground here. They need our ideas. And quite a great sage told me that, who originally taught me how to transmute. Okay. So I don't think too many people have put it that way. So I want to get that out there. And really important big deal. Anyway, that was A bit of a rant, but a critical one. So moving on. Cabal members, including lesser-known senior ones, that they have started to be arrested in the US, but are the white hats waiting to see where the dust settles after the midterm elections and after the 11/11 event, you know, our input and impact, before they really pull the trigger. Now, this is consistent with COBRA's report that the white hats, now in terms of the actual arrests of senior cabal members in the US that's been going on, according to Fulford sources, that has been consistent with COBRA's report yesterday, that the white hats, you know, with tactical support from off-world groups like the Resistance, are already removing all mid-level to low-level cabal members. Basically, they're removing everyone they can, stopping short of removing cabal members that could trigger the Toppler bombs. Now, because of the ramifications of the midterm elections in the US, you know, whichever way it's gone, and the 11/11 energetic event, let alone the meeting between Putin and Trump on that date, the Jesuits, for example, will then respond in certain ways based on which way those three events that I just mentioned go over, you know, and over the next few days. And then the white hats and off-world alliance groups will respond based on that. You know, that's why COBRA said the Jesuits will be closely watched indeed. It really is the proverbial chess game with the highest of stakes. So that's how it's sort of going to play out after, you know, the midterm and the 11/11. That's why this week is so crucial. Now, are we almost there with the clearing of the plasma plane, as all intuitive indicators point to only some stubborn pockets of resistance remaining and little in the way of negative plasma grids and infrastructure left? You know, is that really the case? Now, certainly do your own intuitive or psychic or even 3D homework on this and inquiry, but at this point I'll be saying yes to that, which is part of the reason why COBRA is stressing that it's mostly the Toppler bombs and remaining archons, you know, plasma archons, that's the hold up to the full removal of the cabal. Now, it is important to mention that many, it could even be the majority, but many of the most senior cabal are actually negative ETs that project those telepathic overlays where they look like normal humans to anyone. You know, for anyone who's seen the YouTube presentation of David Wilcott from Contacted in the Desert on I think it was the 6th of June this year, how we met such a character, a high-level cabal member that's not known in the public sphere. And when he shook hands, the cabal member quickly, just briefly dropped his telepathic overlay, and poor David was taken aback, to say the least, with the image of this reptile head right in front of him, and saying, you know, how do you like that? And there is another photo that my good friend Dave showed me on his phone, a big shout out to Dave, of Kennedy. Back in 1962, he had a meeting with the Pope, and they were sort of walking together in a park somewhere. And one of the priests, sort of walking behind the both of them, there was, you know, sort of half his face showed a slightly blurry but still quite vivid and detailed enough image of a seemed like a reptile head or a negative insectoid type image where there was a black eye on one side of his head, and the shape of the jawline. I do believe it was a green colour, fairly distinct, certainly more than distinct enough to show that it was a negative ET with its telepathic overlay briefly dropping and caught by the photo. We know how photos can catch, those orbs and all that kind of stuff. So, anyway, that explains the whole shape-shifting reptilian thing that good old David Icke has been, screaming about for decades now, to his courage and credit. Anyway, the point being that a significant number of senior cabal members are quite literally negative ETs. Now, and most of the other ones are basically negative incarnates of either Dracos or Archons or various types of demon types. Anyway, now, although the numbers of the Archons need to be, non-physical plasma Archons need to be reduced further, we can do meditations during the event or mass arrest to keep them in check, as far as that's concerned. So it is ideal conditions for them to all be removed when the mass arrests happen, but not necessarily needed, okay, if we step up at the time of the mass arrest to keep them in check, okay. It's just more ideal conditions if they are all removed prior to the mass arrest, which is part of our job, okay. Remember, we're the undercover agents working in secret from the physical plane to clear a lot of this far more effectively. Critical role you play. Okay, it was funny with the Trump-Putin meeting happening in Paris, okay, which has got its fair share of grid lines and vortex there, happening on 11/11 by some strange coincidence. So, given the Pentagon's explicit plan to intensify the takedown of the cabal after that meeting, is that a coincidence? And what does this mean for the 144K Army of Light on 11/11? So obviously, it's not a coincidence. And for us, for you and me, it means that whatever is meant to happen with that meeting between Trump and Putin in Paris, it means that it needs our support. 2, remember, quite often, the respective positive militaries meet in secret during such official summits. Quite often at the same locations, but not always. And, maybe the cabal have a fail-safe plan to try to assassinate them at this meeting. And we need to be there to provide that energetic support where, we shift the matrix in a way where, God darn it, if for some reason the bomb didn't go off, and leave the cabals just scratching their heads and wondering what the hell. Or support the White Hat operation to shut down any false flag or assassination attempt. Again, make no mistake, you're needed. You're playing a role in here. Whether the incarnational egoic conditioned mind really is able to grasp it or not. And it was good to see Cobra finally, publicly acknowledging the need to leave the weight club for the event that I've been profusely advocating, almost screaming for quite a few weeks now, and devoting a whole show to it a few weeks ago with Tolek and Marie Bachelor, for those of you who were listening to that, and take matters into our own hands. That's what it's about now. We've moved into that phase of operations with Planetary Liberation where we have to take matters more into our own hands. really critical that you have clarity on that and really receive it. So there are some people, understandably, that just need to hear this, until it sticks. With certain off-world factions, being on the verge of intervening directly on the surface to finally defeat the cabal. But again, like I said before, risk a major conventional war on the surface that could result. I don't believe it'll blow up the whole planet, because I think ETs will utilise their technologies to limit the damage, but that could still very easily result in the physical deaths of up to 2.7 billion lives. Yes, that is an intuitive reading on my part, but that's the kind of thing we're looking at here. If things shift to that higher timeline after, we throw our weight into things on 11/11. So, well, I guess I've answered my own question here in terms of what can we do to calm the situation while bringing the event closer to us. And again, the only real honest answer to that is treating energy work, your soul mission and mass meditations more like a profession. And understanding, really grasping at that deep enough, well, not deep enough, but incarnational personality enough level to not be fooled by your mundane 3D profession or job that you do every day. That is a huge mistake and a trick of the matrix. Like I said, the majority of CIA agents, for example, hold regular jobs. And from time to time, they swing into action, a minority of the time. And again, if you've recently joined the 144K group, you may have received that email that gets into detail about how, even the military, to use a military analogy again, only 4 or 6% of their time is actually spent fighting. The rest of the time is spent, training and traveling and waiting. That's what they do 94% of the time. Okay. So let's get into, to finish off with, the number one element that's causing the resistance and perhaps other underground and off-world groups to swell their ranks in preparation for a possible upheaval on the surface, and why so much focus on the USA. And no, it's not just the Toppler bomb situation. It's kind of related to that, but here's the deal. I've received word that from about 2015, and rest assured, I am atypical and bipartisan in all of this, but there is a critical 3D aspect to it that doesn't just be covered. As of 2015, the ranks of the Republican Party started being cleaned out. Okay? Cabal sitting members were either getting removed or well-meaning, conservatives were finally getting the protection they needed by the white hats to be able to, do the right thing for the people. And this was instrumental in Trump winning the Republican primary back then. Now, regrettably, this simply hasn't happened with the Democratic Party, okay? Because obviously the Republican Party was under the firm grip of, the cabal or neocons, which is basically the cabal version of conservatives. And unfortunately, it didn't happen with the Democratic Party. And not only are there significant numbers of cabal agents that are still sitting members, and up until yesterday, candidates, But the well-meaning Democrats are heavily indoctrinated by the cabal media, aka establishment media, which also, unfortunately, translates into cabal control of them too. So what we've ended up with is a situation where, through that, the cabal still largely controls, regrettably, the Democratic Party, and the white hats have control of the Republican Party because they've kicked out the neocons, right? The Bush types, the Rumsfeld types, the Dick Cheney types, those cabal nut jobs, they've been taken care of on the Republican side. And as a result of all of this, you now have a proxy situation, okay? Another proxy war, or in this case, a proxy political war. You know, now where the white hats control are fighting through the Republican Party, and the cabal is fighting through the Democratic Party. And, rest assured, this knowing and understanding and realisation has been really hard on light workers that have been, lifelong Liberal Democrats. It's been very hard on them. I know two of them myself. Now, the white hats needed the Republicans to hold the House and the Senate to proceed with the general process to the event without instability and possible disruption to goods and services. But as we know now, it's sort of ended up as a nil-all draw. Let's see what they can get done. They still may be able to get what they need to get done, just with control of the Senate and the presidency, obviously. Now, if the Democratic Party won, unless the White Hats plan on revealing the mass voter fraud with the midterm elections and call for another election, you can expect things to get majorly volatile on the surface, and that would increase the probability of direct intervention and pretty much full-blown war with the off-world groups and underground groups intervening directly, which would set off top bombs, and it's hard to say how much damage, whether it would destroy the whole planet or whether those things can be contained. It's hard to say. That remains a tightly kept secret. Basically, this is not a road we want to go, okay, as you may have gathered by now. And that, my friend, is the real reason why the resistance has swelled its ranks under the surface, and why they and the Garthans and God knows what other positive group off-world is threatening to intervene on the surface directly. Okay, it means the proverbial might hit the fan if we don't pull off some kind of miracle, this 11/11 mass meditation. And that's perfectly possible, by the way, in the ways that I've mentioned just before, especially if our higher selves forces enough of our incarnational crap out of the way, which is going to be an unpleasant experience, by the way, and therefore channels enough of itself on D-Day, the 11/11. Now, as always, the way to make that process a lot easier in terms of bringing, more of your higher self into you to express itself through the physical vessel is to trust in the process and surrender to it. Because obviously we know what it's like when the stuff comes up, right? Really, really hard. Well, even more harder if you don't do an energy session on it. Anyway, trust in the process, have trust in that process and surrender to it. And know that all your unresolved internal stuff and your true identity can't exist in the same body at the same time. I mean, it can to a very limited degree, but not really. Yeah, so again, if emotional and physical symptoms start to come up from now on, leading up to the big 11/11 showdown, use the internal compression breakthrough guided session audio that many of you have, or use your most robust clearing help and modality that you know of. Okay, and get rid of it, clear it. If you feel guided to, use the ICB, internal compression breakthrough guided audio, and go up to the teams, the beyond multiversal beings, and ask them, can you please help prepare me for this big 11/11 mass meditation that must succeed to the point where the planet shifts onto a high enough timeline where some of the rocky, volatile surface activities, such as complete economic collapse and a loaf of bread costing $10,000, doesn't happen. Okay? Whilst bringing the event closer still. Here's what needs to happen. Here's what needs to happen. Can you prepare me for this? That's a good thing to do with your own beings or with the beings that you're introduced to in the ICB guided audio, or your favorite healer. If you can afford it, hire your best healer and tell them, hey, I need to be ready for this. Clear me so that more of my light is activated and shines through this physical out-of-body vessel to really be fully prepped, trained, and ready to go on 11/11. We have enough time for that. So begin that preparation. The soldiers for the D-Day landings prepared for many months to make that a success. Again, by having this kind of approach, this kind of mindset approach to 11/11, we treat this in a professional way, like the true professionals that we truly are. And this makes our souls, your soul, and your higher self sing. Really makes them sing, really happy to see that you're really treating this at that right, professional, serious enough level and way. Okay? That's what's going to be key and instrumental in making and manifesting that miracle that will set Gaia's children free really, really soon, and all of us. When the going gets tough, the tough sit down and transmute. And on that sacred note, I bid you a very loving farewell, and I'll see you on the non-physical on that fateful day of an 11/11. Let's make the absolute most of it. Big hugs to you all, and see you there. This is the Unknown Light Warrior. You've been listening to Ground Crew Command Radio. Let's make it happen.